The committee will come to order. The Oversight Committee exists to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have a right to know that the money Washington takes from them is well spent. And second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers, because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. It is our job to work tirelessly in partnership with citizen watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the Federal bureaucracy. It is our mission statement, and it is our calling. Today, when we discuss, once again, HealthCare.gov rollout, which has undeniably been and inarguably a disaster. It is not a disaster of the making of one man or any one person. In fact, in many ways, it is a sign of a failed system that is often seen in the Federal Government and very often seen by this committee. Nearly 2 months after the Federal website launched, even as the Administration declares its vast improvements, components of the back end are still unfinished. Customers are told that at least in some cases, many cases, their applications may not have been correctly forwarded to the insurance carrier, meaning they have signed up, they are not going to get the benefit. They may go to the hospital and not be covered. Or if they are covered, it will only be after weeks, months, or years of paperwork. Additionally, it is now learned that the ability to properly pay insurance companies is in doubt, and as a result, estimates are likely to occur. Estimates are not how you do business. The project's failure raises serious questions on what hindrances government faces when it intervenes in the private market. President Obama wisely said that startups, business startups, often have these sort of problems, that these are the nature of private sector startups. The difference here is the private sector wasn't just starting up, the private sector was fully up. Rather than leveraging the private sector, HealthCare.gov essentially built a whole new layer, a whole new decision process on top of it. Before October 1st, the President told Americans that purchasing insurance on HealthCare.gov would be as simple as shopping for airfare at Kayak or Expedia. I have shopped at Kayak and Expedia. The only difficult thing at those sites is choosing from many choices, well-defined, and making your decision. In fact, nothing has been more different than Kayak or Expedia at the site. Just yesterday, I logged in to the D.C. exchange, where members of Congress must go, and got an error. We do not have either the front end or the back end, not just in the Federal system, but in systems that feed into it, in fact, ready. Can anyone honestly imagine what would happen if you went to buy an airplane ticket on Kayak or Expedia and the site constantly crashed, losing your information? Or, in fact, if they told you, leave your personal email and we'll call you back in 8 or 10 hours, or email you back in 8 or 10 hours, in order to tell you that it's now a better time to try to log on and find prices. HealthCare.gov is a monopoly. HealthCare.gov is a mandated tax end location. For members of Congress, they will either go to HealthCare.gov or they will be without insurance and be fined. Yet today, no one has been held accountable for spending hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer dollars on a website that simply didn't serve the President or the American people on his signature legislation. As someone who spent many years in the private sector, I know that if I'd ever staked my business on a product that performed like this, it is unlikely I would have gotten a second chance. In fact, if a company launched like this, they would have to go back down, regroup, remarket, and relaunch. But that is not the case. Most of the laws stay in place, most of the enforcement stay in place, and as many of the other committees are looking into, Many of the exceptions are not ones which are codified in law or within the purview of the administration to decide to forgive or delay. More importantly, the failure of this website, some $640 million invested, will undoubtedly cause a loss of revenue many times that. The actual exposure to the vendors and the individuals may be limited, but to the American taxpayer, it will be billions of dollars of lost revenue because of this failure. I did not vote for the Affordable Care Act. I do not believe that it will drive down the cost and up the availability and affordability to the American people. However, getting the system under the law to work as well as possible, and then having a discussion about how to improve health care for the American people is our responsibility. Today we are joined by Dr. Clifford Winston of the Brookings Institute, who wrote in 2006, "Government failures appear to be explained by a short-sightedness, inflexibility, conflicting policies of government agencies." I might note that 2006 was before President Obama was President. As Senator Obama, this was not about his government. This was about the government of his predecessor. Health care was broken before President Obama came. By its very design, the Federal Government may never be efficient or effective or innovative enough to carry out big initiatives like Obamacare, nor should it be. Government should not be picking winners and losers precisely because it is proven to be so bad at it. More importantly, America is a free market country, and the free market has worked for the American people time and time again. Americans know that when you close off and create an artificial monopoly, it costs more. It always costs more not to have competition. But in fact, that's what's happening in health care today. Half of health care costs to the Federal Government reflects the entire cost of defense. Defense is not something we can outsource to the private sector. Health care is something that has always been within the private sector and should be. We can hire the best and brightest, as administrators have boasted, and still end up with a product that arrives delayed and not working properly. There are things that are inherently governmental, and this committee will always be absolutely determined to defend the responsibility of government to do what is governmental, procurement certainly being one of them. Protecting our homeland, securing property rights are just a few of the others. But something as complicated, as complex, as multifaceted as a web portal supposed to rival sites like Amazon.com for health care is something the Federal Government clearly was not prepared to take on and do properly. Government inefficiencies are not limited to massive interventions in the health care industry. However, as this committee, which has voted on a unanimous and bipartisan basis the reform of IT procurement, has discovered, we need to make major changes in how we do procurement. We also need to do what is inherently governmental and leverage the private sector to the greatest extent possible. The hearing today will go a ways toward understanding what government can do, what it cannot do, what in fact should be expected by our government, and what should be expected to be innovated in the private sector. The limitations on big government will never include preventing waste in a massive scale. It will always happen, and this committee will do everything it can to reduce it, to organize it, but I believe that in fact we have before us an example of something that may be too big to swallow even for the U.S. Federal Government. And with that, I recognize the Ranking